The next part of this deals with conflict in general, which I think does happen in your sites. Hopefully not as often, but it's inevitable. What is conflict? It's disagreement, essentially. Variance, opposition, controversy, disharmony. There's many synonyms you can find online with what conflict is, and again, it's all in context. Just realize these three things, and hopefully it'll make you paint a bigger picture of the actual problem. So, conflict is normal. It's going to happen. Expect it to happen, but prepare yourself. It's inevitable. Conflict is good. It's not bad. Okay, it might seem like it's bad when you're in it, but it's actually good because it raises questions. It challenges you to ask more questions, but to come up with better solutions. Without conflict, there will be no progress or change. And it strengthens relationships at the end of the day, if done right. Okay. Interestingly, one of our faculty members posted something online called collegiality, and it's something that the university judges us on. And he argued that we shouldn't be judged on whether or not we get along with people, just to accept other people's arguments or other people's points of view. And the rationale is, how are we going to change and get better unless we challenge each other? Now, obviously, there's a right way to do it and there's a wrong way to do it. But his interpretation of the term collegiality was getting along just to get along. Don't question. Don't argue. Just be nice to everyone. Okay? And I kind of understand where he's coming from, but I also understand that you need to create a nice working environment. But anyways, the point of telling you that was it's going to happen. People are going to disagree with you. People are going to oppose you. But it depends on how you look at it. It's based on several things. It's based on your perspective. It's based on their perspective. And their perspective and your perspective is shaped by several things. It's shaped by your culture, your education, your experience. It's shaped by so many different things. Now remember we had those 9 faces up there? Some of you threw out these different adjectives or emotions of what that face could mean. And then when you saw what it was, you're like, oh, I didn't know it was that. So some of you might have thought that. It's probably because you had a different perspective on that facial emotion. Okay, it's not to say you're wrong. It's just say that that's what your experience with that face was. Okay. Conflict in the athletic therapy field. I think we've talked about some of you have actually approached me about problems you've had at your sites already with supervisors, coaches, athletes, and so on. I haven't heard anything between peers. It might happen. So at some point we might have to tackle that as well. But you do have 4 scenarios. Okay, so each group, you do have your own scenario that you'll think about when we go through the rest of these slides. So conflict managing styles. So the first thing you need to do is be aware of yourself, because that's where it starts. So what is your conflict managing style? Okay, there's 5 types. In order to find out what yours is, I've asked you to log in. So I've asked you to log in because there's a questionnaire on this presentation. If you Google conflict resolution questionnaire, it'll pop up as well. But before you complete that, here's a quick explanation. It gives you definitions of what the different styles are. It does a better job than I could ever do, so that's why I decided to show the video rather than explain it myself. So here's a quick video on the 5 different styles.
This is a short presentation about managing conflict and the Thomas Kilmann Conflict Mode instrument. Thomas and Kilmann identified a conflict handling grid with 5 management styles based on 2 dimensions, assertiveness and cooperation. In this instance, assertiveness is the level of motivation of the individual to achieve their own goals and objectives, whilst the cooperation axis is about the willingness of the individual to allow the other party to achieve their goals and objectives. There are 5 key styles, and these are avoiding, competing, accommodating, compromising, and collaborating. The avoiding style is low on both cooperative and assertiveness. Usually the original problem is not directly addressed or resolved. There is a sense of ignore it and it will go away. It can be useful when an issue is trivial and may burn out of its own accord, or is likely to have a very short lifespan. It can also be an option when tackling the problem in a more assertive way might cause more disruption than it resolves. This strategy can also allow for cooling off periods. However, avoidance can cause significant problems in the longer term, as a long-running issue is likely to build up resistance and potential resentment over time. The competing style is characterised by high assertiveness and low cooperation, with participants seeking to reach their preferred outcomes at the expense of other individuals. This approach can be appropriate when quick, decisive action is required, such as emergencies. However, continued use of this style of resolution is going to create resentment in the longer term. The accommodating style includes a high degree of cooperation. A person using this style will put aside their own goals in favour of the other person's. This behaviour is appropriate when they realise that their needs are less than the other person's, or when they realise that they have been in the wrong. However, taking this to extreme, this could be a lose-win situation. The compromising style occurs where there are equal levels of cooperation and assertiveness at a moderate level. This can be used where there is a need to find a timely solution and both parties have similar goals. It can also be used where the outcome has moderate or little impact. It should not be used as a long-term solution, however, as it frequently masks stronger underlying issues. The collaborating strategy is high on both the assertiveness and cooperation scales and is similar to a win-win scenario. Both sides creatively work towards a solution which meets the objectives and goals of all persons involved. And whilst this can create an ideal outcome, it can be a complex and time-consuming process to achieve. Each of these styles can be used in the right situation. It is a question of finding that right situation and the right style to use. So here are some questions. Which is your preferred style and why? When have you used one of these styles in the past? What might you have done differently? What will you do next time? When and how might you use these styles in the future?
Okay, so this is just an illustration or diagram of what you just heard. The goal in general is to try to solve problems through collaboration. Now, like they said before, there are some instances where each one of these could potentially be more useful in a specific situation. The general guideline is to think about whether the conflict and the problem you're trying to solve is a short-term problem versus a long-term problem. Okay, if you're trying to fix something now, you might have to revert to one of these, like they said. And in the athletic therapy field, that's a field emergency scenario. Somebody has to take charge and delegate. And then if you're not the one taking charge and delegating, then you have to let that other person do their job. So in that situation, you do have to accommodate or compete. But if you continue to do that, that might run into some issues. So again, short term, maybe one of these. Long term, you want something up here. Okay. In the short term, they said this is potentially useful during a timeout period. If emotions get too hot and too aggressive, it might not be a bad idea to take a step back and let things cool down. So avoiding that situation for just the time being, until emotions are low enough to where you can compromise and potentially collaborate for future solutions, this might be useful in that instance. Okay. So when you're looking at, so I put this together based on long-term goals and long-term solutions. So if you are this type of person, just realize that more likely than not, you're not going to achieve your goals. You're just going to keep putting it off to the side. And as a result, poor relationships, no progress, it's a lose-lose for both parties. Whether you're competing or accommodating, one person's going to take over or you're going to let them take over. At some point, the other person who keeps accommodating is not going to like that situation. Okay, so that establishes poor relationships as well. It's typically one-sided. And it's a lose-win or a win-lose. One person is always going to lose. Now, usually people go towards compromise, and that's fine. Like, let's just meet halfway. So we'll do this if you do that. And that's fine. It does create a win-win situation, but usually in the short term, everyone's treated as equals. But although the goals are attained, it doesn't really look into the future. Like, what happens if this happens again? Okay. Now, the goal is to be a collaborator, a problem solver, create a win-win situation, everybody's equals. It is progressive. The only drawback to collaboration is what? I think they mentioned it on the one slide. Like, what is the problem with that conflict management style? It's very time-consuming. You can't do that in an emergency, especially if it's a life crisis. But that's why the debriefing after an emergency is very important. Because that's where you collaborate. And then you come up with a plan. And you might have to adjust your emergency action plan as a result. Okay, but that's where you collaborate. During the situation, you have to resort to one of these. Okay. Why do you think people have so many meetings? Okay, that's a time to brainstorm and collaborate. Okay, it is time consuming. So, determine your conflict management style. So, on this presentation, if you click on this link, it'll open up a questionnaire. It's about 20-25 questions. It asks you what you would do in particular situations, and then at the end of it, if you hit submit, it'll tell you what conflict management style you prefer. So, in order to solve a problem, you need to know where you're coming from first. So, please complete this questionnaire and have an idea of what conflict management style you prefer the most. Okay? It shouldn't take you more than 10 minutes. So I'll set my timer for about 10 minutes.